How's it going, everybody? My name is Austin. I'm with Apostles Addict, and you can find me here on Faithful Dialogues, and I'm with my buddy Ryan.
Hey, Austin. My name's Ryan, and I'm with AIIW.org. Check me out over there. And this is my friend Christian. He is joining us today to talk about the fourth. There is a background video playing. Austin?
Is it playing right now?
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh, it's not playing for me. That's weird.
I don't think I can.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry about that, everybody. Take two. So my name's Ryan, and this is my friend Christian. He's joining us today. He has a huge passion for our founding fathers, for our country, and he wants to share some of that knowledge with us here today. So, Christian, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi guys. My name's Christian Silva. I'm a uh, teacher, I guess you could say, but I'm with the homeschool community. It's not like we have one spot we're in. We go through different places. I teach a class to homeschool kids. I call it American Heroes. For a whole year, the kids they learn the entire story of the American Revolution. If you come to my class, you'll see kids shooting each other with Nerf guns. You'll say, "Is this history?" Yes, that is history. Because if kids shoot each other with Nerf guns, then I tell them about a battle, and they want to listen to it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen him teach his classes. They're incredible. He gets the kids really engaged with what they're learning, and always make sure to wrap it up with you know with some good fun and good education as well.
Nice. All right. So, yeah, today we basically have a 4th of July special where we're going to learn about our founding fathers, how the country got started and everything of that kind of nature. And Christian Silva is a very passionate about this subject. He when I first met him, he was really interested about it and talking to me and kind of telling me the different cool things that happened and all the key people and what they did. And so I wanted to have him on the show today. Me and Ryan wanted to have him on the show. And yeah, so basically we're going to go through a couple of the things for the stream, and then we're going to get right rolling into the message with the 4th of July stuff. So really quick, just wanted to go over the gospel really fast. Basically, the gospel is God stepped into his creation through the person of Jesus Christ, and he allowed his perfect life, his sinless life, to be a sacrifice on the cross so that he could pay for the sins of the world as he could pay for our sins with his sacrifice. And if we he rose 3 days later, and if we put our faith in Jesus and who he was the Messiah who was supposed to come. He is the Christ. And if we put our faith that Jesus is the Christ, that he is the Messiah, that he died on the cross for our sins, that God did raise him 3 days later, then we have a promise from God that we will see him in heaven. We will exist with him eternally in heaven forever. And I urge everybody, if you're not a Christian, to put your faith in Jesus today. All right. And then Ryan has a message that he wants to give us as well.
Yeah, so one of the things, if you're already a Christian, you've already put your faith in Jesus Christ, if you profess that he is Lord and believe in your heart that he rose from the dead, one of the things that means is that you are a priest and that you have certain responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities that I believe that I have, and I think that Austin and Christian think that of themselves as well, is to spread the gospel. And that's why we're here today, to do that, to minister to our community and take any prayer requests that you might have, any questions, any comments. You can text those to us at 833-262-6431. And yeah, so we just want to minister to you guys and see what we can do to help.
All right. So we've got that. All right. And then we've got a little video that we want to play for you guys right here. So basically, this is Christian, what is this video?
Oh, this is John Adams from the HBO show, which is awesome. I recommend it.
Okay.
It's him giving his rousing speech for independence and why the rest of the Congress should vote for it.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and watch this clip. It is about 3 minutes long, and I imagine this clip is going to be referenced a little later in the episode. So I'm going to go ahead and play that now.
President recognizes Mr. Adams of Massachusetts.
Are you capable of turning the volume up a little bit?
It's on. I don't. So it's for you. Like
Is it?
um, my
So there's a
volume's
little,
for me and your volume's for you.
no, there's a little volume bar that you can next to the play button.
Is it louder now?
I think so.
Objects of the most
Yeah.
Because I turned it all the way up.
Okay.
Okay.
stupendous magnitude. Measures which will affect the lives of millions, born and unborn, are now before us. We must expect a great expense of blood to obtain them. But we must always remember that a free constitution of civil government cannot be purchased at too dear a rate, as there is nothing on this side of Jerusalem of greater importance to mankind. My worthy colleague from Pennsylvania has spoken with great ingenuity and eloquence. He has given you a grim prognostication of our national future, but where he foresees apocalypse, I see hope. I see a new nation ready to take its place in the world. Not an empire, but a republic. And a republic of laws, not men. Gentlemen, we are in the very midst of revolution. The most complete, unexpected, and remarkable of any in the history of the world. How few of the human race have ever had an opportunity of choosing a system of government for themselves and their children. I am not without apprehensions, gentlemen. But the end we have in sight is more than worth all the means. I believe, sirs, that the hour has come. My judgment approves this measure, and my whole heart is in it. All that I have, all that I am, and all that I hope in this life, I am now ready to stake upon it. While I live, let me have a country. A free country.
All right. So before I'm sure we're gonna in the timeline get to this point where we're gonna cover what's going on there, but just to briefly let us know what is this meeting? What is he really saying? There was a lot of fancy words there. What is he really talking about?
Well, it's a lot of great fancy words. I love listening to these guys reading their stuff. They've got a lot of fancy words. But that's one of the questions that should be answered is why did they go from being loyal British subjects, as they would put it, to let's start a brand new country and let's separate ourselves from this person, King George III, who, I mean, as far as definitionally what made you an Englishman was you had a king of England, you had a king of Britain. That's what tied you together with those people. The British people still living on the continent, right? Or on the island. You were on the continent, but you were all Englishmen. It was the same king who ruled over you. So what happened? That would be the question that we should look into. Because I put it that way because a lot of people, what they do is they'll just say, well, here's list off bad things they did. Let's list off things they were hypocritical about and go, that's what this country was founded on. Well, when you say the founding is it's the why we went from one nation to another. So answering that question, why, that is really the founding. Does that make sense? If
Yeah.
they're being hypocritical, if George Washington owns some slaves, like he's hypocritical, but he's not. Did he separate himself from Great Britain because Great Britain was trying to take away his slaves? Then I would say, well, yeah, then our country's founded on slavery. But if that's something else is going on, right, then you're founded on that thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So really quick, tell me about this hat. This is a cool
Oh,
hat that Ryan went out of his way to get
oh
me.
well, you got the tricorn hat I got from Amazon. The kids were supposed to come to a thing called Liberty Camp. It got canceled. Apparently, all the summer camps everywhere are suffering with enrollment. I only got 4. I need to get at least 6. I can't have just.
Do you
Yeah.
do you have any other dates coming up?
No, because I
that-
was trying to
stuff?
do it. Literally, it was this week. It was supposed to be because it's the week before 4th of July.
Mhm.
But there's I only got 4.
Yeah.
So part of their project was they were gonna get that hat and they had to make their little cockades on the side.
So what is this white thing right here?
It's my attempt at a cockade. A cockade be
What
like
is a cockade?
it's just like a ribbon. Typically, it's fully round. I had to go through experiments. I had to create something that a first grader could make. Typically, you'd put it on
Ah.
your hats. That time period, they might represent. Well, if you had a fancier one, you were obviously more rich. You were more distinguished. But they might put like I think at that time they would put pink on the officers. You see, if you saw someone with a pink cockade on their tricorn hat, you knew that was an officer. Also, we had the cockade of the American Franco Alliance. Our first allies were the French. I believe that was like it was a black cockade with a white middle that represented our alliance. So we would wear one and they would wear one.
So this was kind of like it was kind of like part of a military uniform almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like fashion slash signifier, like insignias.
And it kind of also
Interesting.
denoted rank, you said a little bit.
Yeah, I think in the early days we initiated something like that.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
interesting.
All
So
right.
you had to have a couldn't just have a hat. You had to have a cockade on it.
Well, and you know, it's interesting the different ways that different cultures display military
Yeah.
like, rank and insignia. I know that in the United States we do it a lot on our shoulders, right? The shoulders have when you're in the military, the shoulders
dress
have your
uniform, I
rank.
believe. Yeah.
What else? What other parts of the uniform
Well,
denote your
you're
rank?
looking for
Uh,
like a regular uniform. You're looking for right here,
Mm-hmm.
up at, and right here.
Okay.
And you just look over and you go, oh, it's a private, or oh, that's a captain, sir. You got to stop what you're doing, saluting. So
Because I know to kind of tie this into the Bible a little bit, in biblical times, the hem of your robe, so kind of like around your waist, was where you would look for somebody's rank and insignia. And so it's just interesting how that's changed. So when you see something in the Bible that says that they touched the hem, or at one point King David cuts the hem off of King Saul's clothing, that was seen as him almost like cutting off his lineage in a certain way. And so it's just
Oh, wow.
interesting the way that
Interesting,
those ranks and the way that you show your your family heritage has changed.
yeah, so this is a time period where, so we would say it's modern history. They're coming out of feudal Europe, where it's like, my lord, you got your lords. You still kind of have that. There's still hereditary lords, but they're in America. We're getting to the point where we're going, does this really make sense? And we're but you still have that. So at that point in time, it would say someone was a gentleman, and a gentleman was someone who didn't have to work with their hands. So, like George Washington, he had so much land, he'd be considered a gentleman. Or they might say esquire. You have a certain amount of wealth. They still had like, but if you were like Paul Revere, you're a goldsmith, they would call you a mechanic. You work with your hands. So you still had a place in society. Well, at the same time, we're going to get to the point of all men are created equal. So you see, you're coming out of that world to something new. That's the whole.
Well, and you said that there were lords like in the army or the military, right? And could there be like a lord that was in charge of stuff because he had?
Yeah, that's what that commission was. in the British. It's you're coming out of a world where if you're a noble, right, you get to be in charge of it. People still then would buy their military commissions, especially in the British Army, and then in the Continental Army it gets a little different because they're just power appointing dudes.
Yeah.
That Congress is just appoint. We have no army. We have no structure. We don't have anything to sell you. They're just appointing people,
Well,
and who they're appointing, gentlemen.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, and it's interesting how that changed, that because we had that break from the British, now our system is almost entirely meritocratic, right? It's
Yes.
based off of how good you are at your job, hopefully, in the best
Yeah.
case scenario.
One of the interesting guys, side thing, I like the story of the war. We're going to talk about the political side. The war itself is incredible, Revolutionary War. But there's this guy from New York. His name's William Alexander, aka Lord Stirling. And you go, who is this guy? Well, he was born in New York, and I guess he was in some sort of line to become the Lord of Stirling back in Scotland. So someone died. I don't know the whole story the whole thing, but someone died, and he's like, okay, I'm going to leave New York, the home. At this point, that's his birthplace, to go back to Scotland. When I say we were British back then, that's what I'm talking about. Like, they're British.
Yeah.
He's about to go back to Britain, to Scotland, to go take his lordship. But then something happened where they passed some law. They gave it to someone else. So here's William Alexander, the would-be lord, or they kind of, his nickname is Lord Stirling, stays in New York, and after the Declaration of Independence, he becomes a general in the Continental Army, leads, I think it's the Maryland 400 at the Battle of Brooklyn Heights, gets taken prisoner. And I'm like, I mean, how one little thing, and he's a Scottish lord fighting on their side against us.
Yeah.
But now he's an American. It's just how entrenched.
I don't think this was the point you were trying to make, but is it also possible that that's kind of an indication of what the British were doing across the board to a lot of American citizens, where they would pass some
a lot of people would see that symbolic of what's happening to them. A lot of what's going on here is like George Washington himself. He fights the French Indian War on behalf of the British, and during that time period, he realizes the British Army does not treat Continental militia like they're equal parts here. They definitely see themselves as a superior people, and it's like a whole thing. So back to that question, I was saying, what would make those British people say, no, we're not going to even be British anymore, we're going to make a different country? And to me, the answer is liberty. This thing called liberty, that's what's going to make the cause. And the other question we're going to look in as a Christian podcast is, how much was religion in general, right, important, and was it Christian? Because there's this claim by a lot of secular historians that the founding fathers were, well, they might have been Christians, but their thought process was very secular, and they were trying to establish a secular state. Even a lot of Christians today, I mean, I'm arguing with Christians on Facebook telling me that we're overplaying how religious they are. And in this whole argument, I'm quoting people, and he's quoted nobody. He's just informing me that this is how they thought. I'm quoting founding fathers. I'm quoting them using words like the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then they're telling me, well, they could just be general Christian moralists. I'm like, he said the gospel of Jesus Christ, and he's using that as his reference for why the state of New York is implementing religious freedom in their constitution. It's like, what do you need to? So over and over again, you're going to see this. So like I said, liberty. I'm going to start by quoting my favorite founding father, Samuel Adams. But there's a sad thing when you see him in media. He's presented as like the street gang rebel rouser, and they present John Adams, so we saw a clip of, as like the serious guy, right? But it's kind of like,
No, dude,
Samuel
Samuel
Adams-
Adams makes great beer. That's what it is.
yeah, he's like a drunken Bostonian street gang guy. Now there was a lot of those guys during that time period. But John Adams, or Samuel Adams, you're going to find out he's 10 years older than his brother, his cousin, Samuel Adams, or John Adams. He's like 10 years older. He's the most pious and elegant founding father I could ever find. He's like a Harvard grad. And every time I read him, I'm like, oh my gosh. Sometimes I refer to him as the last Puritan. He's also referred to as the father of the revolution. So I like his definition of liberty. Let's read this together. In a state of nature, every man has a right to think and act according to the dictates of his own mind, which in that state are subject to no other and can be commanded by no other power than the laws and ordinances of the great creator of all things. Did you catch
So
that?
that's one of our founding fathers
This is
acknowledging
Samuel-
a creator.
This is Samuel Adams. He wrote an essay or a article on liberty. He's trying to define it. So, in a state of nature, every man can act as a right to think and act according to dictates of their own mind. So, the state of nature, what he's saying is your natural way of being is that no one's bossing you around except for God
Your
himself.
creator.
Does that make sense? Oh, there's another myth that he
Yeah.
doesn't just use the word God. He says the creator of all things. And that's supposed to be like when you hear these guys saying deity, or they don't use the word God outright. That's supposed to be proof that they're not, they're like half in the Bible, half out. Like, no, it's just they're very eloquent in speaking, which you'll see. So he's saying that's what's supposed to happen. But of course, we know from the Bible what happens. What happens to mankind at the beginning of the Bible?
They rebel.
Rebel. So that's why he says here, had mankind continued in that innocent and happy state in which the sacred writings represent them at first created. What are the sacred writings?
Scripture.
Clearly,
Scripture.
Buddha and Confucius,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So he's saying if mankind, that's Adam and Eve, had they stayed that way, right? Like the Bible says, Genesis 1, it is possible that this liberty would have been, liberty, I mean, to literally do whatever you want, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Except when God says, don't eat this fruit. But the natural state is literally to do whatever you want. And when God says, hey, walk over here, you do that. Not having some dude called a king or a duke, police officer say, hey, you can't be on this side of the street type thing. Had they not sinned, basically, this liberty been enjoyed to such perfection as to have rendered the embodying into civil society and securing human laws altogether needless. Does that make sense?
Sorry, what was that again?
So he's saying if we hadn't sinned, basically,
Mhm.
we wouldn't have governments.
Yeah.
That's his theory, right? So this is how he's thinking about liberty. He's thinking about government. And this is where you get the idea of limited government, if you know that phrase. So you have a government because men are sinful, and they're going to go around stealing and killing people, right? Stealing from people, killing. So you have a government, as the Bible says in Romans 13, with a sword to chop those guys down. But he's saying, so that's the idea. So, but the natural state still is for man to be free. They're not supposed to be bossed around by the police. So you limit what the police and the governors and the kings are doing, because they're supposed to be governing in a sense that they're putting down sin, putting down human evil, and protecting each other. So that's where we're getting. See this is a biblical thinking. All right, so here's the question here. Sorry.
That's
This is-
okay.
This is a question.
Someone has to be in charge of
that he
locking
puts out.
somebody up,
Get
so
some
it's
water.
necessary. Yeah.
So here's the question he asks. It has been a question much controverted in the world. What form of government is best, and what system of liberty is best consulted and preserved? Or is this liberty best consulted and preserved? So what form of government could we have in which this liberty is your natural state best preserved? And then he says this: I cannot say that I am wholly free from prejudice, of that prejudice that generally possesses men in favor of their own country. So do you guys feel the same way?
Oh, absolutely. I love my country.
Right. So do you think America, if we had to answer this question, or so far, at least in the history of the world, do you think it's America? Do you think it's America has the best form of government? It's okay to be so he's saying I acknowledge my prejudice, so go ahead. Feel free. Are you prejudiced about your own country?
Oh, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, here's a
for
curveball.
sure.
You ready for the curveball? Here's the curveball. Here's the curveball. On my own part, there is no form of civil government that I have heard of that appears to me so well calculated to preserve this blessing, liberty, or to secure to its subjects all the most valuable advantages of civil society as the English. Curveball.
Yep.
This was written in 1748. There is no such thing as the United States of America. So I read that. Curveball, he says the English form of government. This is what we're getting here. The English form of government is the best form of government. You'd say, what the heck is the English form of government, as they would call the English Constitution. So the way it would work, and of course, it's not like our great Constitution that was they sat down in one room at one time and hammered the whole thing out, and then presented that to the public and said, "This is it, right? That's our Constitution." This is like a series of Civil War, English Civil War, and the Glorious Revolution. But the idea is, you have a king, but he's not all powerful. This isn't like the King of France, where everyone has to, do everything he says. But instead of having, you have a king who's a powerful head of the military. So you have that guy, and he's actually the pinpoint that links all Englishmen together, governmental wise, as they would put it. Right? You'll see that. You have something called the Parliament. That's the lawmakers. These are the people that are voted in by the British citizens. That's a key point. And because they are voted in by the British citizens, they represent the British citizens, which means they get to be the lawmakers.
So, in this parliament, is there something like a parliament in our government today?
Yes, we would call that the House of Representatives.
Okay, and this is the entire parliament elected, or is there different parts of it?
There's different parts. So in their parliament, thank you. Their parliament, they would have the House of. So they have the House of Lords, and that's like a hereditary thing. But then there's the House of Commons, where the commoners get to vote in their representatives. The idea is they represent the people, and because they represent the people, they get to make the laws. And the linchpin for British theory here, legal theory, is who gets to tax people. For some reason, that's the one thing. So the king can wage a war, but he doesn't get the right to tax you to wage that war. So that was the separation there, or separation, see those words. So the House of Commons can raise taxes. They're the only people who can raise the taxes, right? That is represented in our current Constitution because the House of Representatives are the only people who can raise taxes.
Any expenditure of money.
Yes.
Just to start in the House.
So it's the central legal issue. For some reason, it all gets put into this: who has the power to tax, right? Who has the power to tax? And that power of tax has to be related to whichever government represents the people, which would be the House of Commons. Now, the colonies at that time, government instituted, literally worked the same way. So, but they would have a governor, like Massachusetts has a governor. That governor got there because the king directly appointed him. And then they would have a House of Representatives, Massachusetts House of Representatives. I think in Pennsylvania, they called it the Assembly. In Virginia, it's the House of Burgesses, because why not? Let's be fancy. But these are all the representatives that are voted in directly by the people, right? And then each one of those colonies, most of them, and some of them are a little weird, the governor appoints. Unless you're in Rhode Island, you get to vote for your governor because it's not universal. But that's the simple idea right there. Simple but complicated. And then there's the jury system. Thank God for the jury system. The English have a jury of your peers, right? So if you get accused of a crime, the person who decides your innocence or guilt is, like, if you're a baker, it's the regular dudes on the street, right? You don't have 5 noblemen looking down at you in your raggedy shirt, right? So you have a jury of your peers, and they get to decide if you're innocent or guilty. So the state, the people in charge trying to punish you for a crime, right? They got to prove it to someone else that's not even part of the government. Does that make sense? They got to prove it to a people. So that means that's how the people have power within this system. Not perfect, kind of confusing. So what happens? Yeah, any questions, Austin?
Oh,
Nope.
you're muted.
Oh,
Sorry.
you're muted?
Not yet.
Well, that's why I couldn't hear you.
No, I
So-
wasn't talking, but I'm still trying to just kind of wrap my mind around everything that you're saying. When questions pop up, I'll definitely.
Yeah, so-
What you're talking about here, this is where our idea here in the United States of separation of powers comes from.
Yes,
You've
yes.
used the word separation a few times.
Yes, that's
So I just wanted to state that for everybody. If you took your
Yeah.
high school civics
As
class.
awesome as the United States is, it's not like we just completely invented something completely brand new. We're going to do something different and new, but it's not like 100. It's not like I mean, we have a Senate, for example. I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
and that's kind of a proxy for the House of Lords. And
Yeah.
originally, our Senate was appointed by the state, so they were kind of like the American version of a lord,
Yeah, they were actual senators.
right?
They're not senators
And
anymore.
and so then our House of Representatives is like the House of Commons, and it's interesting to see how that all morphs and changes.
Yeah. Um. So everything's great in the world of Samuel Adams. He lives in the most, best constitution. And then what happens is this thing called the French and Indian War. Basically, the French were over here too with their own colonies. This guy named George Washington, he's like a young guy in the Virginia militia. He goes off to send him a letter, say, get out of the Ohio country. This is British land. They say no. He goes back with an army, shoots some guys, first little battle, starts something called the French and Indian War, which is almost like a world war fought over North America. And like I say world war because the British got colonies, French got colonies in Asia, everywhere. British win. We take the Ohio country. It's like Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, that whole area. We take it. And the way the British win that war, because we lose it really bad in the beginning, the way they win that war is they just spend tons of money. They just spend tons of money. They just outspend the French. So basically what happens is Parliament says, wow, we're in debt over this war. What are we going to do? So they decide to pass a simple little insignificant tax on sugar. Just a little tax on sugar, but this tax on sugar would be paid in and by the colonies, the 13 colonies. And yeah, from there, not everybody freaks out, but a guy, Samuel Adams, freaks out. Does not like this law. It's not a huge tax, not like it's going to destroy the economy or anything. Just one little tax on sugar. But why does he say you can't tax us? Well, because you're putting a tax on people that didn't have a vote in the tax. We'd say taxation without representation. So this is the British Parliament is passing a tax in Great Britain. They don't ask the colonies who have their own legislatures to raise taxes, right? They don't ask them, oh, do you approve of this tax? Or do they just pass it? Say it's now a law.
So, just to be clear, in this system, the citizens of Britain that live in America at this time,
Yes.
they're not Americans yet, they're still British citizens.
Yes.
They don't have a member of parliament that they elected.
They do not have a member of parliament in the island of Great Britain.
Okay.
They do have representatives.
In their own local
In
legislatures.
their legislature, because that is their legislature.
And then does that legislature have any impact on the parliament?
No. What they would have is they might vote for this, like Benjamin Franklin does this job these times. They might vote someone as like sort of like their ambassador type person.
So
to go talk on their behalf, but he's not a member of their parliament.
Yeah, so there's a very similar thing today with like the territories of the United States. So
yes,
if you live in a territory of the United States, you don't get a U.S. member of the House, but there's a person that can go and be a liaison between the House and your territory.
Yeah, he doesn't have any official say over that body, but he's there. So let me show you how this worked too. This is a document called the Instructions to the Boston Representatives. Basically, Boston, it's not just Massachusetts. It's the city of Boston. The town of Boston is going to have, like, their name's going to pop up over and over again. So, but this is a town meeting they had. And in the town meeting, they're going to write a letter to the people they voted into office, their representative. That's why it's the instructions. So get this. They didn't just vote for the people. They have a town meeting to write those guys they voted for a letter to say, this is what we expect you to do.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And one of the things they say is that you need to go over there and oppose the Stamp Act, or the at this point, just the Sugar Act. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay. So this is what they say. Oh, and the reason Samuel Adams comes up, because they would always choose him to write the letter and then vote for it. He was the one. So he kind of gets to have the voice. So if you're an eloquent writer, you get to start a revolution, I guess.
Apparently.
But what still heightens our apprehensions is that these unexpected proceedings may be preparatory to new taxations upon us. So it's only one tax now, but what if you start doing more? For our
Giving us a
trade,
cookie.
our trade may be taxed. If our trade may be taxed, why not our lands? Why not the produce of our lands and everything we possess or make use of it? So what we're talking about is the law itself may only be slightly significant, but now you've added the precedent that's what this is about. You have adding the precedent that you guys can just do this whenever you want, right? This we apprehend annihilates our charter right to govern and tax ourselves. So when it says charter rights, like I said, like when they showed up, they were given like a constitution, basically, that called the charter. They said, you're going to have a governor. He's going to be appointed by the king, but then you guys get to have your own legislature, your own little parliament. Call it what you want, but it's a parliament, basically, right? Tax ourselves. It strikes at our British privileges. What is that? British privileges, which we have never forfeited, we hold in common with our fellow subjects who are natives of Britain. If taxes are laid upon us in any shape without our having a legal representation there where they are laid, are we not reduced from the charter of free subjects to the miserable state of tributary slaves? Wow, I like that. Tributary slaves. You know what that is, Austin?
What is he saying there?
He's saying
No.
he's saying if you have the power to just tax us, right, without us having any sort of say, and if that
We're
tax,
basically slaves. Yeah.
you're basically a slave. You're a tributary slave. So like what happens in war sometimes is you win a war against another country, and the easiest way to make peace instead of fully conquering them is that you guys get to pay us $3 million every year or something, $1 billion every year. I don't know. I'm trying to go whatever money it would be back then. So that would be the way you'd solve it. So that state becomes a tributary state. They have to pay tribute every year, or else you go back to war with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He's saying that will become us. So that's part of the argument. And I find this one hilarious because I looked this up, this document up just for this issue. But tucked away in this town meeting apparently was a PS side note, which is funny post-COVID because here's the side note at the end. The committee do further report the following votes. Whereas it hath pleased Almighty God to permit the smallpox to prevail in this town, whereby the inhabitants have been great sufferers, as well by the extraordinary expense it hath occasioned by the loss of business. Therefore voted the representatives be desired in behalf of the town assembly to move that the general assembly would afford us such relief under the disasters as they in their great goodness shall think proper. Anyway, basically apparently there was a giant smallpox epidemic. Not like a COVID. This was like smallpox, like the real thing.
Where there's like actually
People dying.
Yeah, huge percentage.
Apparently people are suffering. And the first thing to say is it please Almighty God to send this to his town. Now here's the funny part. It says, whereas it is conceived that the selectmen of the town are not sufficiently empowered by the laws already in being to take such steps as may be necessary to prevent the inhabitants of other towns from bringing and spreading infectious distempers among us, therefore voted the representatives be desired to use their endeavors to obtain such additional power to be given to the selectmen of the General Assembly, in their wisdom shall think proper to invest in them. Basically what the townspeople are saying is we don't have the power to like stop sick people from coming into our town. We can't quarantine our town. Could you guys please vote on that and vote us the power to have a quarantine, is what they're saying.
Yeah.
So they didn't just say, oh, well, people are dying and...
Well, they didn't have a rat poop inspector come in
Yeah.
and say that you can't operate your business because of COVID.
Yeah, they didn't have all that already in place. They like, literally people are dying from smallpox and they're sending a letter as the PS side note. The side note.
Yeah, well, and you know,
The Sugar Act was worse.
well, and this letter would have taken days or weeks to get wherever it was
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
Right?
Well, for Boston at that point, Boston happened to be the capital, so.
Oh, okay.
But this was kind of a normal thing for towns to do. You'd have a town meeting
Mhm.
because each town would have their own representatives. But I just think that the side note is we're dying from smallpox. The important thing is you better not keep taxing us with this,
Yeah.
like this illegal tax, right? Also, people are dying. Could you please give us the power to do something about it? Like
Yeah.
that's how committed they are to So unlike the stereotype American, I just don't like laws. I don't like taxes. I just do what I want, right? It's like, no, we have proper laws for proper purpose. Does that make
We just
sense?
want to follow the channels properly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to approach things kind of in like a timeline way.
Mm.
When I was a kid, they said, what is it? Hold on, 1492. Christopher
Oh,
Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Like, what's going on with Christopher Columbus? Who is Christopher Columbus, and like, why is he significant? Is he significant?
well, yeah, he's significant. He's ironically an Italian guy who goes to the court of Spain, right? Fernando and
Mhm.
Isabella, and he's trying to find someone to commission his sea voyage because he believes
He's
there's
from Spain.
he's Italian, but he goes to Spain, just to be
Oh, okay,
confused.
Yeah, so
Confusing.
so he was born in Italy, and then the only people he could get to fund his expedition were the Spanish.
Or so the story
Nice.
goes. Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't done that much thought on Christopher Columbus. The idea is he's trying to find India, and he thinks he can go there by traveling west instead of east, because he thinks the world is round. Which I hear is a myth that most people back then thought
Yeah,
the world
so-
was flat.
They actually did know. My understanding is they did know that the Earth was round. What it was is there wasn't a safe passage.
Yeah.
So if you think about the time frame, ships weren't sturdy enough to be able to just go across the Atlantic blind, and they didn't have navigation equipment to know exactly where they were. And so if you're sailing across the Atlantic and you run out of supplies, you're just done. And so that's what
Oh,
people were afraid of. Not that they didn't think the Earth was round, but they just didn't know if they could even make it that far on their ship, or they didn't know if there would be islands that way. They thought there could be sea monsters or anything, you know.
Yeah. So
Good
yeah,
tracking.
he gets to North America. He doesn't know it's North America. He thinks he's in India. Of course, names everyone Indians. Yeah, but it's kind of sad that it's like let's hate on Christopher Columbus now, and it's like, well, you wouldn't be here for better or worse. You know what I mean? I wish we would get rid of Columbus Day like people want, and I would call it New World Day, because it's like the New World is like it's a different place, and it's a combination of the native people,
Mm-hmm.
the Spanish, the French, all the people who came here and colonized, all the immigrants from Asia who came later on their own accord. Like we're a completely different thing going on this side of the world now. It started with Columbus. The British get into the exploring North America game late, so
Do you know what year that would have been? Would that be
16 something? It's the Roanoke colony. I think it's the late 1500s.
Okay.
And
So you're saying from 1492 with that Christopher Columbus expedition, nothing happens really significant until
no, a lot.
Roanoke?
Sorry, no, a lot does. The Spanish start colonizing. That means they're gonna go set up they're gonna take over the land and stuff. It's a
Okay.
Spanish explorer named America. Was it Vespucci?
Amerigo? Wasn't it Amerigo?
Something like that. Vespucci.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Apparently, I'm bad at this history, but he gives the name to the entire North and South America.
Yeah, Amerigo Vespucci. I
Yeah, he
believe.
lends his name. It's like a Spanish name, America. So the Spanish, I mean, they set up Mexico. Basically anywhere where they speak Spanish. That's the Spanish colonizing, right? Over here we speak English, so it's like Mexico, most of South America. The Portuguese take Brazil. The French show up in North America, Canada, and the British. I'm saying they get into the game late. So 13 colonies or British colonies, they start showing up.
And did the British themselves send expeditions here, or who were the first people that were coming
To this part
to the East Coast? You know, who were the first British people
of
that
North America,
Yeah.
The Spanish are in Florida, and the French are up in North Canada. The English had explored the area, but there's a difference in exploring it and sending people to live there.
Okay.
So getting in the colony game, I think
Mhm.
it's under Queen Elizabeth that they go to Virginia. It's called Virginia because she's the Virgin Queen. They try to set up the Roanoke colony, which disappears mysteriously. Spooky. And it's not till Jamestown they get our first permanent settlement.
Okay.
That's like early 1600s.
So where does like pardon my ignorance, where does like Lewis and Clark come in?
That is post American Revolution. That's like we've already won the war. Thomas Jefferson's president.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
we've got okay, so then I want to talk about Roanoke and kind of go further from there. But I want to kind of take a step back from there. What time period was Roanoke? When did that happen? Do you
Okay,
know?
so we're talking the end of the 1500s, I believe. I mean, someone fact check me. They try to establish the Virginia colony. The first attempt is they wind up on an island called Roanoke. I guess the captain goes home. He leaves the people, goes home to get more supplies, comes back, everyone's gone, and there's just this
Nice.
word phrase written on a tree called was I right? 1585? Yeah. Just this weird phrase, Krakatoan, just written on the trees. And they're like, what is this? They don't know what happened, so it's like a whole thing.
It sounds like some kind of people group got involved. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
under it's under King James the First that they established Jamestown, Virginia. That's like your Pocahontas story, right there.
Huh.
John Smith.
Okay.
That is successful. Successful. It's pretty hard times. They go through this something called the starving time. But a lot of those guys and that expedition are there to make it rich. They're looking for gold. They don't find any gold, but they grow tobacco and they get rich later on. That's Virginia, and then
Oh, okay. So you're saying that the original settlers of even the East Coast some were looking for gold as well.
yes,
Even
Interesting.
Roanoke?
I had forgotten about that.
yeah, in Virginia they were like a lot of these dudes were trying to get rich quick, and then John Smith is like, dude, you got to build a house and like hunt for food.
Not just dig.
That's
for gold.
literally why he's a hero, because he's like, I'm gonna go try to make friends with these Indians and trade with them, and then they take him prisoner, and they're gonna kill him, and then Pocahontas, who wasn't his girlfriend, which is just weird that Disney did that. Pocahontas is like a 12-year-old daughter of the chief who supposedly likes him. He's able to make friends even though he doesn't speak their language with them. So Pocahontas like jumps on top of him supposedly and saves his life. And I don't know why Disney has him like as a boyfriend girlfriend thing. It was like she's like a little girl at that time.
Maybe because Disney's weird. Who knows?
Yeah. So then you get the Massachusetts colony, or no, sorry, Plymouth colony. That's your whole Pilgrim story. That happens later. Those guys were looking for. They were coming over to Virginia, but they're leaving for a different reason. They're being persecuted by the English church for being dissenters, as they would say, or not, or being Puritans and dissenters, because they don't want to obey what the Church of England is saying. So they're
So
actually
they just kind of set up camp over here in America. They're just hunting for food. They're
They're-
digging for gold.
well, no,
and
no.
They're like, so go ahead.
yeah, that's Virginia. Yeah. At first,
So
And
I
then
think
it
that-
evolves into the colony of Massachusetts.
yeah. No,
Okay.
that's later. I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying so. Each colony has its own history
Yeah,
and
so
reasons.
like
Oh, okay.
Pennsylvania has its own backstory. Each of the 13 colonies has a too big of a story to go into in detail for each.
Yeah,
one
they're
of
all
them.
pretty cool.
But and I think that the people looking for gold were some of the first people, but I don't think they looked for gold terribly long, did they? Like
No,
found
they
out
started
that there wasn't
starving,
any.
and then there was the colony almost failed until they realized they could grow tobacco.
Okay.
And then
So
actually,
what was
what actually happens after that time period is that the English mindset towards colonies changes from that of the French and the Spanish colonies, where French and Spanish colonies they're get rich. They're like go over there, make a bunch of money, come home, like for
Yeah.
trade goods. So like the Spanish, like it's for gold, silver, right? Or they got cash crops, but it's not like the best place to be. In North America, it's like they start writing home like, actually, once you settle this place, you tear down the trees. This is like great farmland. Like, this is a great place to live.
Mm.
Come like literally here to live here. Like, and that's the plan, right? Not come here, set up a trading post, be in the trading post, get rich, maybe go home later, right? Like
Yeah.
the English are like, chop the trees down, baby. Let's settle this place.
So is that why we see in the United States, all of the original founding fathers were farmers. Everybody was kind of,
yeah,
not everybody, but most people were involved.
yeah. It's a land grab. They want land.
Okay. And so I'm just trying to still establish, like, in my mind, when things first got started. So, like, what was like the first colony, and when do we start to get like a little America going on?
That would be Virginia.
Okay.
Virginia is the first. I think the next would be the Plymouth colony, which happens later. But technically, like Virginia, like the border of Virginia that we're looking at, like they're claiming like a lot is Virginia, so it's like a process. But the Plymouth colony, that's your Thanksgiving pilgrim people who are living in Holland because the Church of England is like chopping their ears off and stuff
Ooh.
for not conforming to what the English church says is Christianity. So what is
Which was
Christianity?
what? What were they saying?
They would have like the Bishop of Canterbury, I believe. The Anglican Church is the official state church, right? And so therefore
Uh-huh.
you do church this way. You guys got like it's a thing where like they're throwing John Bunyan in jail for being an unlicensed pastor. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Okay.
So the Pilgrims,
So,
their little community, it's like a church community. Their church community is illegal.
Yeah, so I think one of the things as a citizen of the United States here in 2023,
Yeah.
it's hard for us to comprehend that they did not have religious freedom. Okay? You were the religion that your king was, basically. Like, you couldn't just convert because you wanted to. So these preachers would try to preach the gospel of Christ, but the Anglican Church would be stopping them, and so they had to figure out different ways to go about doing that. Are you looking for something?
Why-
Yeah, I got Sammy Adams here.
Do you
Yeah,
can you
sorry.
quickly tell me what like a Anglican is?
Yeah, so an Anglican is a person who is a member of the Church of England, and the Church of England started, I'm going to really shorten it, it basically started because King Henry VIII wanted to get a divorce. And so
yeah,
is their
basically.
theology
Basically.
like more leaning
Their
towards
the-
Christianity,
their,
or
their theology is we were Roman
Like,
Catholic
now,
and we
yeah.
wanted a divorce.
Oh, okay.
It's confusing.
It's morphed and evolved over time, but that's where it started. And
like
so
a
it's
small
kinda-
Reformation or something?
Yes.
So at that time period, you got people who are like Calvinist types who want to make the Church of England like they want to reform the Church of England and make it more biblical, right? And then you got people like they call dissenters who are like, no established church at all. Have your own church in like over there in your house. That's fine. You got a mix of things. And in the founding era, founding fathers, they're going to be, you got Anglicans, Presbyterians, you got all these different groups.
Well, and so when we say founding fathers, we're talking about people from all the different colonies. So
Yeah.
like Pennsylvania was started as a colony. What
For-
the Quakers, right?
Well, a Quaker started it.
Yeah. So it was started, and then a bunch of Quakers showed up, and it
Yeah,
has its own
Quakers over
complicated
there.
history. Virginia was started by people that are probably pretty loyal
More
to,
Anglican.
to the Queen. And so each colony and the people from those colonies are going to be colored by that history.
Yeah. Where we at on
Okay.
time?
Did you have something
Oh
that
my
you wanted
gosh.
to read?
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, remember the essay on liberty? It's funny because Samuel Adams, he's looking back and he says, our fathers had so severely felt the effects of tyranny and the weight of the bishop's yoke, the bishops, right? That they underwent the greatest difficulties and toils to secure to themselves and transmit to their posterity those invaluable blessings, and we, their posterity, are this day reaping the fruits of their toils. So he's remembering, yeah, we left those bishops behind. So one of the things about the religious persecution in the colonies is that it was like a loophole to stay English, but then practice religious freedom. So you would go to the colonies in the name of the king, start an English colony over here, so you could keep your English identity and still be loyal to the king, but then ignore the laws. Is you're not directly under the bishop's yoke, right?
Sounds like that's how China has to
it-
be a Christian too. You gotta play
It's
the
sort
game
of,
to get to
yeah,
America.
that's sort of what they did, which
and
is
then...
and then they call it, then it's sometimes referred to as the benign neglect, where the British kind of went, they're over there doing a thing, and then later they got big and important. Then the British were like, wait a second, let's tax these people.
Go, hold on, let's pump the brakes on them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did we get what time period was the 13th colony finally there, and we
Oh,
became
I
the
think
13
like
colonies?
Georgia doesn't even get Georgia's the last one, I believe. It gets established in like the 1730s.
1730s. Okay,
It's like a
and
penal
so
colony or something.
So yeah,
I
basically.
understand that okay, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
No, that's okay. Sorry.
I understand that our flag is transforming and kind of upgrading as the colonies are starting to get added and stuff like that. So, just a little bit of history about the flag. Where did our flag come from? Who made it? How did it kind of progress and evolve?
The American flag, you got to have United States of America for first.
Okay. Did we
There-
have
there's-
colony flags?
I think they probably would have. They would have had symbols related to the colony.
Yeah, so each
Okay.
colony would have had their own their own flags and
And-
markings.
Were
in
we a
Massachusetts-
united? They ever get to the point where we're like the United 13 colonies? Was it like a pre-America at some point?
Yes. But that's when the war
Or-
starts.
Oh, okay. So,
But we haven't got there
all
yet.
right. So, 17. All right. How do you want to? I was gonna take it from the 1730s and start moving forward, but
I
go
was
for
gonna
it. Where
say,
do you want?
So
where
I
do
was
you
saying,
wanna-
so like you got the colonies, and you got them. They're British. They're charters. And then this, like I said, the government wants to tax them over the
Okay.
French Indian War, right? We read about that. Then the Sugar Act was an annoyance. A lot of people don't like it, but then Parliament passes the Stamp Act. You've heard of the Stamp Act?
I've heard of it.
This is where-
is it
this-
taxing stamps or
This is
taxing?
where-
I don't know.
no, it's a tax on anything that's like printed.
That uses a stamp.
No. So like, if I wrote an essay on printed and I printed it in the newspaper, you could only legally print it on a piece of paper that had a stamp. And
Oh,
that
big
stamp
rip.
was
Okay.
provided, and you bought it from the British Parliament's like ministers. So they would
This
send
is when
these
they.
stamp collectors over here. They're basically tax collectors.
I
and
was
they
gonna
have-
say this
they've
is when
got-
the government starts to get their hands in everything.
They've got
right?
this. They've got this. It's like the dumbest idea ever. Not only is it's bad on principle, it's like a dumb way of doing things. But so they got this giant stacks of paper, right, with government approved stamps, and you have to buy it from them. So if I find you with a newspaper that doesn't have the
doesn't have a
stamp on it,
stamp.
you and whoever you're in violation of the law, right? I think they said you could be punished for treason and death without the right of clergy or whatever they would say.
Oh my! For
No.
not having
This
the
government
stamp.
Yeah, the right without clergy is like a bureaucratic thing where you'd be convicted under civil law, but then you could appeal to clerical law. They said no, you can't appeal to clerical law if you do this. It was like a whole thing. So this like
Dang.
And no wonder no wonder freedom of the press was such an important thing to our founding fathers.
yeah. So the Stamp Act leads to basically riots in Boston. This is where you get the image of the tarring and feathering.
Is that the Tea Party? Are we getting to the Tea Party
we'll
soon?
get
Is that what
there.
that is?
We're getting there. That's also over taxes. So, but this is like the dumb one. This is like their first attempt to really
Okay.
tax the snot out of us, I guess. Yeah, it does not received well in the colonies. So there's like it leads to riot. It leads to like the lieutenant governor of Massachusetts having his house burned and the head stamp collector having his house like ransacked. And this is where like the image of Sam Adams as this like rebel rousing like street punk comes from. Because there was some of that, but there's also the political element of it too. A lot of politicians weren't calling for that, but like people are just incensed. It's like crazy, this law. And I could actually, what is the argument for the Americans? What happens down in Virginia is this young politician from Virginia named Patrick Henry stands up in their legislative body. They call it the House of Burgesses, and he gives he proposes 5 resolutions in opposition to the Stamp Acts. And I actually really like this document because if you just read this, it like makes the entire case for what the columnist's opinion is. I have Ryan over here if you want to read it.
All right.
Go through these 5 of these.
The Virginia Stamp Act Resolutions 1765 resolved that the first adventurers and settlers of His Majesty's colony and dominion of Virginia brought with them and transmitted to their posterity and all other his majesty's subjects, since inhabiting in this his majesty's said colony, all the liberties, privileges, franchises, and immunities that have at any time been held, enjoyed, and possessed by the people of Great Britain. Resolved, that by two... Oh, sorry.
Do you understand what that meant? I'll put it in normal English.
No.
Normal
Yeah,
English.
because mine has to do gymnastics in order to understand this. I need the NLT for the way
Yes,
these
I'll
guys
give you the NLT
write
version.
stuff.
The NLT version is when our forefathers left Britain to start a colony over here, the same rights that they had there, they brought with them. They didn't stop being free
Oh,
people
okay.
just because they got on a boat.
They didn't
and
stop
left.
being Britishmen. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's what that means.
Yep.
Um,
All right, so that's number one.
number two.
Number two, resolved that by two royal charters granted by King James I, the colonists aforesaid are declared entitled to all liberties, privileges, and immunities of denizens and natural subjects to all intents and purposes as if they had been abiding and born within the realm of England. So it's just basically reiterating that.
Yeah, well, this was saying we have a natural right
Mhm.
that we brought with us that we keep wherever we go. This is saying not only that, but the king literally told us by law, by charter, we have the same rights as if we were still living in England.
So it would be enough for the first point to be true,
Yes.
but to double that,
Double down.
by right, by natural right, and by this actual piece of paper that we can point to.
Yes.
All right.
Three.
So resolved that the taxation of the people by themselves or by persons chosen by themselves to represent them, who can only know what taxes the people are able to bear, or the easiest method of raising them, and must themselves be affected by every tax laid on the people, is the only security against a burdensome taxation, and the distinguishing characteristic of British freedom, without which the ancient constitution cannot exist.
Basically, they're saying, this idea of taxation without representation, it's a thing. It's the only way to make sure we're free. And he references the British Constitution, right? The ancient Constitution of Britain. That's what he's saying there, right? He's always
So you can't just do stuff without us voting on it, is basically. what
Yeah, he's
saying.
reminding everyone what taxation without representation is.
Well, and I think one of the most important parts of this is, and must themselves be affected by every tax laid on
Yes.
the people. So, like, if you go look at the Bible, Matthew was a tax collector in the Bible, and at that time, what a tax collector did is he just went up to the people and got whatever taxes he could. He didn't have to pay those taxes himself, and it actually in excess of whatever money he raised that he was required to give to the authorities, the Roman authorities, he could keep in excess of that. And so what tax collectors would do before in ancient times is
Cheat people.
they would just cheat people left and right, take as much as they could get, and do whatever they could, and that obviously is a huge burden on the population. So this is just reiterating that
Yeah.
any taxes that are being collected have to be collected from the tax collector too, because that's
Yeah.
gonna
So you can't have a system where the people pass the tax laws aren't affected by it. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, number 4.
Resolved that His Majesty's liege people of this his most ancient and loyal colony have without interruption enjoyed the inestimable right of being governed by such laws respecting their internal policy and taxation as are derived from their own consent with the approbation of their sovereign or his substitute, and that the same has never been forfeited or yielded up, but has been constantly recognized by the kings and people of Great Britain.
You're basically saying we've always done it this way. We've always done it this way, guys.
Why are you changing it now?
And if you notice it, the king's substitute, that's the governor.
Mhm.
Saying, you have your governor over here. Like, we're already part of the system. Why are you changing it as an idea? All right, here's number 5. Here's the good one. Number 5, by the way, they voted for and then went, the next day and got rid of it because they were like, okay, we went too far. But
All right. So this one apparently gets retracted.
yeah,
but,
they
resolved.
radical.
Therefore, that the General Assembly of this colony have the only and exclusive right and power to lay taxes and impositions upon the inhabitants of this colony, and that every attempt to vest such power in any person or persons whatsoever, other than the General Assembly aforesaid, has a manifest tendency to destroy British as well as American freedom.
Yeah, too radical.
4th of July,
Yeah,
fireworks.
4th of July. So this is the Stamp Act. So when Patrick Henry proposed these, they didn't just go, "Yeah, these sound great." They actually have a huge debate. Someone accuses Henry of treason because he reminds people that Julius Caesar was once a tyrant and he got stabbed to death, and so did King Charles. He got or and while he's saying this, they start screaming treason, treason, and he goes, his famous like one-up line is like, "If this be treason, make the most of it." It's his famous line, and they
man.
barely pass this by narrow margin, and even like this young politician named George Washington was there, and he voted for it, and he was supposed to do the right thing and vote with the old timers, but he votes for this radical idea of freedom, right? I guess. Now, so like I said, the Stamp Act doesn't go very well. The British repeal the Stamp Act; they get rid of it, so they pass it. No one's paying the tax, by the way. No one's like, people are just like doing crazy stuff like printing newspapers and reading newspapers without the. Oh, it got so crazy. You had to, if you wanted to have the funny one is like a deck of playing cards, play some poker. It had to have a little stamp on the cards.
On each card.
Yeah, I think so. Like, stupid. So I mean,
Or maybe like the box or something. I don't
imagine
know.
some drunken colonists like trying to play poker, and they're like, "I ain't got no stamp." They're like, "That's not gonna happen."
Some
So,
tax collector walks up in the bar.
yes, yeah. Get out of here, Tory. Honestly, I would call you a Tory. So if you're a Tory at this time, that means you agree with these measures and you think Britain should be governing the colonies. If you're a patriot, you think the colonies should govern themselves. That's what those.
And what
terms mean at
exactly
that
is
point.
what exactly is a Tory?
Well, we're the Tories calling the
Tories-
Patriots.
Tory was a specific political party,
Oh, okay, it was a political.
but then they just start calling anyone who's pro-British government at this point and what they're doing a Tory.
This is like
and
pre-commie.
then
You commie.
Sam Adams
Yeah,
people
yes.
be part of like a political party called Whigs. They'd be the Whigs. Like Tories, right? Yeah,
Those were the two original parties in the United States.
Oh, yeah, Whigs.
Yeah, we had Whigs at least. Did we have Tories?
Tories, no.
No.
No,
Okay.
Tories we got rid of.
Okay.
You don't want to be a Tory. Anyway, so Parliament gets rid of this law, and when they get rid of this law, they pass another law called the Declaratory Act. Okay, this is important. They say, okay, that was dumb. Sorry about that, but just in case you want to know, colonies, we're going to declare something to you. Here's our declaration. That's what this is. It's, by the way, because this is like a back and forth. What we're seeing here is a back and forth political struggle, right? What they say
Okay.
is the said colonies and plantations in America have been, are, and of right ought to be subordinate unto the. It's the opposite of what Henry was saying, right? He was saying, no, we've never been like that. He's saying they are and ought to be subordinate unto, independent upon the imperial crown and parliament of Great Britain, and that the King's Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Lord's spiritual, that's the Anglican Church, by the way, and temporal, that's the government, right, and commons of Great Britain and Parliament assembled hath and of right ought to have the power and authority to make laws and statutes of sufficient force and validity to bind the colonies and people of America, subjects of the crown of Great Britain, and there's the last part, in all cases whatsoever. In all cases. Okay, so they said, sorry that law sucked.
Why
But
why
by
are
the
you
way,
stressing
if we
that
want to
right
do a
now?
worse,
yeah.
if we want to do a worse law later, we have the right to do it in all cases whatsoever. That little phrase right there did not go well, and that's where so it started with just tax law. We're gonna try to tax you.
That sounds diabolical. Like nothing you can
yes.
do will ever
No,
stop me.
One of the hilarious things is like how bad they are at this. Like, okay, that phrase "in all cases whatsoever" is going to show up in our Declaration of Independence. We quote that little line right there. We say, "Oh, they've said they can like legislate in all cases whatsoever." So no, screw them, right? So in all cases whatsoever. So what happens is, some time goes by, then Parliament. There was this guy named Townsend. I think it was Robert Townsend. I forget his name. Who, AKA Champagne Charlie. That was his name. Fairly.
That sounds like a cool name.
Champagne Charlie says, guys, I got it. here's how we're going to get some revenue. Let's tax the colonies again. But that Stamp Act was dumb. So let's just tax them on things like random things like lead and sugar or tea. Let's tax them on tea. I think there's a glass. But just a bunch of random
Just like
things.
incremental imports and exports. That way, like,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Well,
Oh,
lead,
no, that
lead
was
makes sense.
That was the key. So they would say, this is an import duty. This is different than the Stamp Act. This is an import duty. So this is only a tax as you import these items. Now the problem too here is that the colonies at this point don't have a large industry. Like they're not like a large industrial place like London, England, right? That's where the industry is, right? So they're importing everything.
all the finished goods.
All the
So
finished goods.
They'd eat probably what they grew and,
And,
what they raised locally.
in certain metallurgy stuff, like we didn't have like huge foundries.
Yeah,
So we couldn't we weren't just like pumping out like iron, right? Or
you might get the
Oh, you got
rocks
a
out of the ground
blacksmith.
here.
yeah, like you gotta import the actual finished product
Yeah.
from the mines right over here, and then like you can work on it.
Well, and
Work with it, yeah.
At
So I
least,
think it was like that was like lead. Why did they say lead?
Well-
Because we weren't making lead.
well, specifically, lead would be a way of taxing revolts.
yeah.
so-
Oh yeah,
Was
yeah.
it
Lead.
used for like
Yeah.
guns
They
and stuff?
they literally, if you as a Revolutionary War soldier, you'd have your own lead that you would melt down every night to form
Yeah.
new balls for your musket.
And even at that,
What?
even
Yeah.
at that, and at that point, a lot of people's
Imagine
cool.
getting shot with a pure lead musket
Yeah,
ball. Ugh.
That's it's still pure lead today.
So one cool thing too is that we still imported our clothing from Great Britain because that's where the textile manufacturing was. And
Okay.
we didn't have a lot of sheep over here, I guess. At that point, like we hadn't gotten to the sheep industry yet, so we had to import our wool clothes. And so what happens at this point is one of the ways you protest this is by wearing your clothes over and over again and restitching it. And so this is where the age of they say the age of homespun comes from, where the idea of like there's some old lady knitting in the corner, that wasn't happening till this act. Now it's like the patriotic thing to do is get
Yeah.
the women that are going to make clothes because we're not going to buy
Well, it
clothes from Great Britain right now.
it also
I
ma-
like
it-
that
yeah.
attitude. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not received well either because remember this isn't the first one they did. This is like post all cases whatsoever, so we know what you're up to. And then so at this point Samuel Adams, so I keep quoting, he becomes a member of the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives of Massachusetts decide to send a letter to the other colonies about their opinion and what should be done about the Stamp Act, or right? And you can see again, and the word that keeps coming up is the word Constitution. If you haven't noticed, they keep making constitutional argument, but this is called the Massachusetts Circular Letter. The House have humbly represented to his ministry their own sentiments that His Majesty's High Court of Parliament is the supreme legislative power over the whole empire. So what they're saying here is we acknowledge that Parliament is sort of like the highest legislative body in the whole empire. They're saying we're part of the empire. We get that. Does that make sense? But there's a but, of course. So they acknowledge that. But listen to this: that in all free states, the Constitution is fixed. What does that mean?
Maybe they talk about stuff and fix errors in their constitution. I don't know. I don't really know
No,
what they're
fixed
saying
means
right
it's stuck. It's like glue.
here. Oh,
Like you're fixing it to the
okay.
wall. So in every free country, the Constitution is a solid thing that you can't just change overnight.
oh, it's
Does that make
concrete
sense?
set in stone.
Yes, you can't just decide, well, we're going to ignore this because we really need the money. That's what Parliament was doing.
Then on a side tangent,
just press
why
something?
did we start amending our constitution?
Well,
Like,
in
why
our
did- wha- like-
Constitution, because of this idea, we made it very hard to do so.
Yeah.
You had to go through a process.
So
Okay.
the process for amending the Constitution of Britain was Parliament
Yeah.
passes an act.
And guys who lived
And
through this
so-
time period came up with that idea.
And so 51% of their parliament can change their constitution, right? In our system, it takes multiple different bodies, all with 3/4 of the people agreeing. So it takes the legislature of the United States 3/4 agreeing, and then it takes 3/4 of the states' legislatures all agreeing to an amendment, and then the president has to sign it. So there's a huge barrier to amending our Constitution, where there's basically none to amending the Constitution.
That
of Britain.
actually it makes me feel better to know that there isn't just one political ideology in this country, that I things will get kind of like, as Jordan Peterson puts it, like fought in the realm of ideas. Like we have to
Yes.
present things and we have to legislate them, and people have to agree with it, and that's other side of the aisle as
Mhm.
well. And so
Yeah.
I actually now I can see and appreciate why we have dissenting opinions now, because
Yeah.
it checks us. Do you know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
that's good.
Mhm. Yep.
So, in all free states, the Constitution is fixed, and as the supreme legislative, that's a fancy way of saying parliament, but listen to this, derives its power and authority from the Constitution. They're saying, we acknowledge Parliament's role, but it derives its power from the Constitution. It cannot overleap the bounds of it without destroying its own foundation. So, we can only acknowledge someone's power from us because of the Constitution, but if we start letting them just go against the Constitution, then they have no power anymore.
Yeah.
It's like a weird way of saying, like, you only have your power from the Constitution, so I can't let you go over it. I'm not even obeying you anymore. It's like a weird,
Okay.
you've destroyed your own legitimacy at this point.
Yes.
Because the only way you have legitimacy is when you
It's from
are
the
being
Constitution.
constitutional.
So
Yeah.
if you start overleaping it, and now we've just destroyed your authority in a weird way.
Then you've rescinded your own authority because you're acting outside of the realm of the Constitution.
Yes.
That kind of makes
Yeah,
sense. That's very cool.
Oh, sorry, I don't
It's
know
okay.
this. Rescind is a funny word, because what happens after this one document goes out is the governor said, this is sedition. You must rescind this. That's literally what they said.
What is sedition?
Sedition is like disloyalty,
You're like
treason.
Yeah.
Or you're saying, you're in the form of speech. It's like disloyalty. So it's seditious, right? This is treason, what you guys are saying. You're telling us that you don't have to obey us. Like, you're telling us that we're interpreting the laws right, where we're telling you what to do, you Massachusetts. Like, and not only that, it's seditious because you're telling the other colonies, this was a letter for the other colonies, you're telling the other colonies to stand fast, don't obey these laws, right? They have no authority to do this. So the governor tells them, you must get rid of these laws. So they have another vote, and they vote 92 to 17 not to rescind. So Sammy Adams is part of that voting parliament. They said not to rescind. They became known as the Glorious 92. Yeah, so
Because they said, "Nah, we're cool. We're gonna stay with."
Yeah,
what we
yeah,
did."
yeah. Oh, and the funny thing at this period is at the end of this circular, they're seditious. They literally end their letter by saying, the House cannot conclude without expressing their firm confidence in the King, our common head and father, that the united and dutiful supplications of his distressed American subjects will meet with the royal and favorable acceptance. That's how they ended that letter, but of course they're still being rebellious, apparently.
Well, and I think the technicality that they were working under is they can be, I don't know if rebellious is the right term, but they can be in opposition to the parliament, but not in opposition to the king. There's a two separate bodies.
So,
in their
like, we're not
opinion.
gonna
Yeah,
do
it's
it, but our loyalty to the king.
Well, and that's what they're appealing to is this
Yeah.
greater idea that the king's over the parliament, sort of anyway.
Yeah, what's happening is these laws originate from the British Parliament, and the king at this point is signing them into law. He could veto these laws. He's not, but they're still holding on to this, like, he's a young king. He's being that was literally the opinion. He's being misled, and people, like, literally, it's hard for people at this point, they still have a king, to say something ill of the king, right? Unless you're Patrick Henry. That's why he's such a radical, apparently.
Okay, so they start passing more taxes.
So this law. So this is the battle. This is the battle between this law. It doesn't go well, of course. So they say, okay, we're going to repeal all these laws except for one tax law on one item. What item is that?
Is that the sugar or the tea? The tea.
Tea. And they're leaving
Okay.
this tax on. Because what happens in between this time period is in order to force these Bostonians to pay their taxes, they send a bunch of British soldiers over there. A skirmish
Oh, they're in
happens.
the harbors.
Yeah. Skirmish happens in the town of Boston. We call that the Boston Massacre. It's a whole thing. Little known fact about that is the guys who end up shooting the colonists all get off innocent because John Adams, a young lawyer, defends them in court and proves that they were fighting in self-defense. But of
Because we
course,
started shooting at them.
everyone's still mad at the British because they're killing us over tax laws. Everyone forgets the part that these guys were declared innocent. So Parliament, it's bad PR, that whole thing. So they repeal everything except for the tax on tea. They leave that tax on tea because they want to assert their authority to legislate in the colonies in all cases.
They're still flexing.
Yeah, they're still flexing in all cases whatsoever. It's like, bro, we can pass dumb laws. We can pass good laws. We'll pass whatever law we want, right? The colonists are like, no, you can't pass a law that's unconstitutional.
Well,
There's certain laws you can, there's certain ones you can't.
yeah.
They're getting very technical, and the British are like, ah.
And does this go back to the whole we're not being represented, so you shouldn't be taxing us?
Yes. So what the point is that the single issue has to do with the tax, but it's over the general debate is the problem. Is like, does Parliament have the authority to legislate in all cases whatsoever?
Well,
That's the real debate.
I think that something as Americans we might not understand is how important tea was to them. I mean,
Yes.
British culture has a tea time. It's a whole thing. Like when they were taxing tea, they were essentially asserting dominance over their Britishness in a certain
Yeah.
way. At least that's how I'm kind of seeing it now. I might be misinterpreting that, but
Then what happens is so they leave the tax on tea, then they pass I think it's called the East India Trading Company Tea Act. They basically give a failing company, East India Trading Company, who has a bunch of tea that they're losing, like it's going to go rotten or whatever, right? They basically give them some mercantile privileges to sell in the colonies at a cheaper discount. And technically they passed a law that lowered the tax. That's the funny part. They lowered the tax on tea. The tax on tea was lower than it had ever been before, but it was still an unconstitutional tax. So a specific ship
So
came
this was
over.
a issue on principle, right?
Yes, a specific ship came over called the Dartmouth. It landed in Boston Harbor, and as it on its way, they had a huge town meeting, and they were like, "Okay, we all agree we're not letting the tea come off, right?" Yes, we all agree. So the ship was unloaded of all its cargo except for the tea. And when I say town meeting, they had a town meeting, and they set up like literally watch guards on the ship. So you and me like might volunteer to literally go, like 10 of us stand there for an hour in front of the harbor and make sure no one tries to take the tea off the ship. Like, it was pretty crazy. So what part of the struggle here was it was a time clock. I think they had 20 days according to British custom laws that if you stayed in a port for 20 days or more, you had to unload everything. That was the law. So like, because ships might be selling half their cargo in one city, another one. So they have this law, like if you're there for 20 days, you're up to something shady, I guess. I don't know what the point was, but you have to unload. So the town meeting came up with a plan. Let's pay the guys to leave. Let's pay them what we would give them, the amount of money that it would cost to buy the tea, but to just take the tea and go home. There's a solution, right?
and they could sail on down and try to sell it somewhere else if they
Or
want.
wherever.
Yeah.
Look, if you're the sailor, you don't care. Whatever, you get your money, right? So the governor, who represents the king, vetoed this action. He said, "No, you guys cannot pay these guys to not unload their tea." So it went back and forth. They're writing letters.
So that was a spiteful action for sure.
Yeah, so doing this, and Sam Adams is telling people stuff like, I got a pillow or I got a gun under my bed, guys. Everyone should have their gun under their pillow ready, or whatever he was saying, something like that. So it gets down to the last day. They send one last appeal to the governor, who says no. Samuel Adams says in the town meeting, there's nothing left that this meeting can do for the country. And that was the signal, supposedly, where a bunch of dudes dressed up like Indians showed up on these three ships and peacefully, as much as possible, destroyed all their tea and dumped it in the harbor. Yeah, America. Instead of paying the tax.
What's the
dumped
very
it all.
brief thing? Okay, so they just dumped it all. I heard that they
Dumped it all.
cleaned up afterwards, and
Yeah, they
were
didn't
very-
they didn't do any damage to the ship. They cleaned up afterwards. They wanted to make it known that they're literally, it's just the tea. It's not, we don't like hate you. It's just the tea and this tax. This is where Parliament doesn't, like, they're just bad. they pass what the Americans call the intolerable acts, a series of laws, like 5 of them. Basically, what they do is they punish the town of Boston. First off, they literally send warships into Boston Harbor. They're like, this harbor is shut down until you guys pay that back. And at first, a lot of the other colonists were like, whoa, those Bostonians are radicals. They went too far. And then the British go, we're shutting down their town complete, like literally, like they can't import or export. And this is like a sea town. Like that's everyone's job, right? So everyone's, they also revoke the Massachusetts Charter. So that charter, that was their system of government. They literally said, no, you're kind of, for right now, under direct military rule. Your new governor is General Thomas Gage. Congratulations, you got a military governor. So this is like martial law. They moved the capital out of Boston to like Salem at that point, somewhere else. They move it out of Boston. Boston's like the capital, right? That's a big deal because it's referenced in the Declaration. They do that on purpose because that's where. Yeah, they're making life hard, right? There's some other things. I think the Quebec Act's in there, but those are like the main ones. The worst one that really upsets everyone is the revoking of the charter and literally shutting down the town of Boston. So what happens is the colonies, other colonies and neighbors are literally sending food to Boston by land. Like this colony of Virginia has a day of fasting and prayer, right? for their sister colony, as they would say. They have a day of fasting and prayer. And it is decided that an act of unity must be taken, and they agree to meet in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. They invite all 13 colonies to send what they call delegates, their best and their brightest.
What does that mean, the First Continental Congress?
Continental Congress. So they're going to meet. So every colony send like your best 5 or 8 guys, whatever. I don't know why they have different numbers, but send someone that represents your colony. We're going to all sit down in Philadelphia together, and we're going to come up with some sort of act of unity because this is ridiculous what they're doing to Massachusetts. So instead of scaring the colonies away from taking further resistance, they actually end up pushing us together more, because the other colonies are like, if they can do this to Massachusetts, they're literally going to do it to us. So that's where the First Continental Congress, we meet in Philadelphia. And then nothing like that had ever happened before. Well, there was a Stamp Act Congress, but this was crazy because everyone was there except for Georgia. They kind of couldn't make it some reason. I mean, George Washington is there, Samuel Adams is there. So all these guys who have been reading each other's like newspaper articles and thoughts, all the political thinkers that you've heard about from the other colonies, they're sitting in the room together and they're talking it out. Interesting thing is the first thing they do is they want to have a prayer meeting, and someone says we can't have a prayer meeting because we're all of different denominations. Some of you are like weirdo Baptists and stuff. We can't pray together. And Samuel Adams is like, no, I'll pray with anyone who's like a friend of their country and a pious man, right? So they bring in an Anglican minister. He reads the 35th Psalm, which starts with like, it's like defend me. I can't remember it by hand. It's about getting your shields and your bucklers, your shield and spear together, I think.
Wow.
And defending, like asking the Lord to defend you from your enemies, right? Something like that. He'll read it in a second.
A Psalm of David, plead my cause, O Lord, with those who strive with me.
Yeah.
Fight against those who fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler and stand up for my help. Also draw out the spear and stop those who pursue me. Say to my soul, I am your salvation, or in Hebrew, Yeshua.
Yeah, so the first meeting of our Continental Congress, Founding Fathers get together, had a prayer meeting. This verse was read, and according to them, everyone was like just on fire now, like ready to go. If you could,
they're basically saying like, God be with us as we go through.
There's a painting of the founding. It's a painting of the Founding Fathers all like praying while this pastor preaches, and someone's like crying in the background.
All those deists.
Yeah, all the deists, the non-religious deists who say to let's Bible. So
really quick, why don't you address that? What is deism? What is a deist?
So
and,
supposedly a deist is a person who believes in like a creator deity, a creator God, as someone who creates like a universe that we live in, but then doesn't affect it. Like he's not actually active anymore.
So there's
sort of like
miracles.
Yeah, sort of like me like creating a painting, and he just looks over at it. It's just doing its thing now. He's not like actively
It's
involved.
a terrarium, and he's just watching.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whereas Christianity teaches that God became man,
It-
put on flesh,
yeah.
bore our sin for us. Right?
It's laughable to say they were deists.
Mhm.
They can only ever the only two I know of. Someone can fact check me and let me know if there's another one, but I know of Thomas Paine and Ethan Allen. Those are the ones I know are actual deists because they said they were deists.
And these
So not
are-
even Jefferson, because I always hear
No, not Jefferson. He was not an So a lot of these guys they point to and say they're deists, and then people ignore it because we know that they're not Orthodox Christians. But that's not the same as being a deist.
Yeah.
And then those are like the only ones they point to. They don't point to. They don't talk about Samuel Adams. Anyway, so Congress is formed. One of the interesting things that happens is a guy named Paul Revere shows up on a horse, and he brings. So this is like a political battle. Like I'm saying, this is peace. It's political. It's done with the pen. The newspaper is the weapon of this battle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the newspaper. So this is big deal. Paul Revere shows up on a horse, and he has brought something called the Suffolk Resolves. Suffolk Resolves, like what the heck is that? He's talking about Suffolk County, Massachusetts, because the Intolerable Acts shut down the town meeting. So these guys were like, okay, fine, we'll meet as a county. It's literally just Boston, but it's Suffolk County, which I just find hilarious. So Paul Revere, his less famous ride, shows up and hands this to the Congress because a lot of the delegates from like other states are like they're looking at the Massachusetts guy like you guys are just radical crazy. It's a nice document. I don't have it with me. It's just saying it says stuff like Great Britain of old is persecuting us once again. The Congress agrees. This was why the Congress agrees to they vote to give their approval of that document. So they're all saying, yes, we agree with, when it comes to this struggle, all of these colonies, we agree with those guys. We agree with the local Bostonians, actually. So by the way, nice trying to shut them down, but we actually agree with them and what they're saying. That's important. One of these cool documents is called the Address to the People of Great Britain.
Oh, hey,
Really quick, hold
Are
on.
we out of time?
Austin. I know
No,
that
no.
you're. It's coming up pretty up.
Yeah, I was gonna address that really quick. So, in about 5-10 minutes ish, I'll just turn on close my camera and stuff like that. But I
All
do
right.
want you to keep going.
Yeah, let me try to hammer through this real quick. So
No, you don't have to finish for me. Like you can keep going with
okay.
just Ryan after I.
well, yeah,
leave and
because
stuff.
we're getting to the point where what we're going to celebrate on 4th of July is coming up.
Okay.
So you see what's happening? It starts with this tax law on sugar, and then it's exploding now, and now all the colonies work together. But this is one of the cool ones: is the Address to the People of Great Britain. Continental Congress writes a letter not to Parliament, not to the King, but literally to their fellow British people living in Great Britain. That's what this is. It's like, it says, friends and fellow subjects, when a nation led to greatness by the hand of liberty and possessed of all the glory that heroism, munificence, and humanity can bestow, descends to the ungrateful task of forging chains for her friends and children, and instead of giving support to freedom, turns advocate for slavery and oppression, there is reason to suspect she has either ceased to be virtuous or has been extremely negligent in the appointment of her rulers. So we wrote a letter there like your people that you vote for are doing this to us. What's up? That was it. And I mean, modern times, I mean, how neglectful are we of our own people we're voting in? They're doing stuff all the time that we're not paying attention to. So there's some blame on the people personally for what's going on. I just find this I think John Jay was the author of this, but it's one of the things like this story, like sort of like a tragic breakup what's happening over time. So the Congress, the main thing they do, they send these letters, but the main thing they do is they agree to a continental-wide boycott. Because there was boycotts over here, but this is like a full-on, all 12 colonies. Sorry, Georgia wasn't there. They're going to agree. They will not buy anything produced on the island of Great Britain. And by the way, not every single British politician is like really happy with all this because this is bad for business for everybody. But we're like, no. So it's a continental-wide boycott. This is the point where the colonies have united. Every single colony is doing the same thing. They're writing letters. They have a continental wide meeting, and then that's like the end of peaceful solutions, basically. What happens next down in Virginia is, I guess, like the Burgesses have to meet in their normal capital is Williamsburg, so they have to go to the modern capital. Richmond wasn't even the capital then. They have to meet in Richmond at St. John's Church because they literally are running away from their governor because they're having an illegal meeting of the Burgesses. And that is where Patrick Henry, this radical politician, proposes that they raise the militia. The militia are those regular everyday people that are supposed to show up with their musket. He says, raise the militia into a posture of defense, as they put it. Like, literally, we're about to be invaded, right? So if we put that here, like, but this isn't the French, this isn't the Spanish. He's saying their own country and government is going to invade them and do what they're doing in Massachusetts. So he proposes this. They're like, no way, this is crazy. We can't go to war. Then he gives his famous liberty or death speech. He says, give me liberty or give me death. Virginia organizes for war. During that speech, he says something quite particular. He says, the next gale from the north will be the sound of resounding arms. He says, the next big thing. He says, the next big thing, because he's saying, we've been trying peaceful methods for like 10 years. And he says, but the next thing that's going to happen is that there's going to be guns firing now. He's just predicting it. This is what's going to happen. It's where we're at. He says, our chains are forged and you can hear them clanking on the streets of Boston. That's pretty funny. He's a great. I wish I could read the whole speech.
That's some great language.
Go just read the whole speech in itself. It's its own like 2-hour study.
What's it called again?
Patrick Henry's Liberty or Death speech, because some people only know the last part, but they don't know why he gave that speech, and he don't know the whole thing. But people in that speech are saying, like, he's countering people's arguments, saying, like, how can we win this? And he's saying, there is a just God who resides in heaven, who will raise up friends for us. Stuff like that. But anyway, so what happens up in Massachusetts is the British, under General Gage, decide to do two things one night. They're going to go arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock in the town of Lexington because they find out that they're hanging out in the home of the Reverend Jonas Clark in a church. At the pastor's house, basically. So go arrest them, march out, arrest them, and then march north to Concord, where we hear the colonists are holding their powder magazine, as they would call it. That's where all the supplies of gunpowder and extra bullets are for the Massachusetts militias, right? So go take it. So literally, they're trying to disarm the colony, basically. Trying to cut their teeth off, right? Rip their teeth out. But apparently, there was a spy network of loyal patriots going on, meeting at the Green Dragon Tavern. What exactly they did, how that worked, I don't know. They were spies. So it's like all sorts of speculations. But they're called the Sons of Liberty.
That's awesome.
I know there's a lot about them. I try to look them up, and I'm like, oh, I can't look them up because they're having a secret spy meeting. And they're not writing down every little thing they're doing. But one of these guys is a guy by the name of Paul Revere. So the spy network gets word. Paul Revere gets on a horse and does his famous ride. The first thing he's got to do, he's got to like get on a boat and like quietly go across the river, right? And then he gets on a horse named Brown Beauty, and he goes around not screaming at the top of his lungs, the British are coming, which would have been cool. But he's very quietly waking up specific people. He's waking up the militia leaders. This was actually pre-planned. He knows the whole militia networks of Massachusetts. He's alarming them. He gets to Sam Adams, and John Hancock tells him, get out of here. At a certain point during his ride, he gets captured by British soldiers, and they're holding a pistol to his head. He gets out of there. They're literally telling him, we're going to blow your brains out. But he did his job. He got the word out. By the time the British have marched to the town of Lexington, the militia is ready. They're outnumbered, but they stand fast, where this famous shot heard around the world happens, where the British say that we shot at them first. We say they shot at us first. And it's on. So we've gone from debating to an actual battle at Lexington. They just kill 8 guys, and we have to retreat. We can't really fight them at that point. They march north to Concord, the town of Concord. They start burning down a bridge and stuff, and then the militia has finally rallied. The famous stand at the bridge where they're trying to cross a bridge, and we shoot them and run them back. And the British have to retreat back to Boston. And the whole way they go, militiamen from every little town are showing up with their guns and pistols and whatever they got, just popping out of nowhere, taking shots at them. There's a famous story of the old guy's like 70. He sees the British army marching home. He puts down his like farming tools, gets his gun out, just pops them. Just pops at him, and then they shoot him like 10 times and stab him with some bayonets. And he lived. He lived like another 10 years. I'm trying to remember that story. So the war is on. And yet there is still not a nation on earth called the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
We're still just fighting for liberty, and we're trying to get our own government to acknowledge that we have liberty. Where are we at on time?
So we're at an hour 40. I think Austin had to take off. So he
Yeah.
had to go do what he had to go do.
I mean, do you want to do a part 2, or do you want to keep going?
We can do a part 2.
We can do a part 2.
I'm totally down to have you back on whenever you want to come on,
Yeah,
Christian.
the war happened.
I've really enjoyed being able to talk with you today. I'm sorry that Austin didn't get to.
Oh, is he gone
close it.
already?
I don't know. He closed off his
Oh, okay.
his video. So he's either getting ready. He might be listening to this.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I can hear you. I'm just gonna have to get out of here like
All right.
right now.
He's getting ready.
Peace, buddy.
So it's just up on the screen. Us up on
Just
the
to
screen.
Thank you
summarize-
for coming on,
the-
Christian. We might
okay.
have to have you back pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm coming back. Just to summarize where it goes, the incredible thing about this is how they try to do it peacefully, and they came up with every argument they could, and it turned to blows finally.
Mhm.
But by the time those guys start fighting, they've had a decade of knowing what they're there fighting for,
Yeah.
which is the interesting thing. It's not just the idea of like, oh man, taxes. I don't want to pay no taxes. I just want to drink beer and be an American. Where's my gun? Like, no, it's some of that, but
Yeah, well, and they certainly had their fun with some spiked punch in a few different places.
yeah, gotta have punch.
So it might not sound like this conversation is directly tied to what we normally talk about, where we talk about God and faith and that sort of thing. But I just wanted to reiterate that, like, the men and the women that were involved in the founding of this country, 99%, they were strong, faithful Christians who just wanted to be free from government tyranny to serve their God. And so I think it's important that we understand where that came from, and that's why I brought Christian on to kind of give us some context of the history behind that. It sounds like we're going to have to do a part 2 of this interview with him, and yeah, he'll give us the rest of that story, and we'll tie it all into Christ and kind of explain all that kind of stuff as well. Do you have anything you wanted to finish off with this part 1?
No, yeah, it's in debating this topic with Christians sometimes, I think what they're doing is they are judging the founding era based on how kind of like a shallow, vapid form of patriotic Christianity is today, or like a shallow Christian nationalism is today.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just blaming, it's just like they're assuming it's the same thing. I'm not here to say like every founding father was a Orthodox Christian, like 100%. A lot of them weren't.
Yeah.
But the thing is, during that time period, the same things that you would acknowledge, that you would recognize, like liberty, freedom, all these things, these were not secular virtues. This was a Christian community that came up with these ideas and then fought for them. And it like doesn't happen in a random secular vacuum.
Yeah.
It's like this is a Christian world, and they're thinking like Christians when they come up with these ideas.
Well, and I think that's important for us today. I think a lot of us have kind of started to think that there are two separate worlds, that there is this secular world where I vote and I'm a citizen of the United States, and this Christian world where I'm, a Christian and I do things for Christ. Yeah. And really, they wouldn't have seen it that way in 1776, I don't think. And I don't think it's for us to see it that way either. Our faith and what we believe drastically influences how we should think about politics and how we should think about ourselves and our place within it. So, yeah.
All right.
All right, everybody. I appreciate you joining us today. My name is Ryan. We had Austin with us. He has his clothing line over at apostlesaddict.com. You should go check that out. You can find my personal stuff over at aiiw.org. Christian, is there any way, if anybody wants to join one of your classes, or if there's anybody in Southern California that would like to potentially take one of his classes, you can hit us up at faithfuldialogues.com or in the comments anywhere here, and we'll see if we can work on getting some of his classes filled up with some more kids that want to learn about our country and from a perspective of a Christian. So,
All right, it's great being with you guys. I'll see you later.
all right, good.